So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing how much pressure is on the Kansas City Chiefs to have a good draft. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the video. So I would say there is a great deal of pressure on the Chiefs to have a good draft this year, and not just a good draft. I think they have a great deal of pressure to have a great draft for a lot of reasons, based off of how the season ended last year and based off how the offseason this year has played out leading up into the draft. So there is a great deal of pressure, in my opinion, that the Chiefs have heading into this year's draft. Because if you look at the team right now, I do not think they are a better team than what they were after the AFC Championship game, after that game ended. I don't think there's anybody in on this planet that would say this Chiefs team is better than what they were after that AFC Championship game. Now, obviously, we still have Patrick Mahomes on the team, and that's going to make things a little bit easier for us, and it'll make it where fans are a little bit better at ease knowing that we have Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, and that helps a lot. But still, at the end of the day, they're still not a better team. They are definitely a worse team than what they were after that AFC Championship game ended. Now, real quick, if we look at the signings and the guys they've added in free agency this offseason so far, they've added some good solid pieces that I have no complaints about. Signing Juju, adding MVS to the roster, adding Justin Reed, and then signing Ronald Jones. The Chiefs have made some fairly solid signings. Now, they obviously haven't hit on the big names that we thought they would, especially at defensive line, which is a major issue for this Chiefs team. But if you look at the signings that they have made some really good signings that I have no complaints about, at least when it comes to those guys. But when it comes to the rest of the offseason, it hasn't been a particularly good one. It's been a very odd offseason, to say the least. It's been an offseason that I honestly did not expect that was going to happen. So we have to start by discussing the Chiefs trading away Tyreek Kill. That was a shock to many people as a Chiefs fan. We really did not see that happening. That's a massive hit to the Chiefs offense. You're going to miss the explosiveness of Tyreek Kill. You're going to miss Mahomes having his number one guy. He just set a career high in receptions. So that alone, his production that he just had, we're losing a lot of good talent. It's hard to put into words how much we're going to miss Tyreek Kill. Tyreek Kill, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, you just say those three names right there, and that is usually enough, it feels like, to win an argument when you're discussing the Chiefs. Literally, that's how good those three guys are together, and you could just say Tyreek Kill, Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Kill. That just shows how great they are, and people just know how great that connection was. So losing that instantly is a massive hit to the Chiefs offense. But when it comes to what the Chiefs got in return, it was a great haul. They got 5 draft picks, and then it allows them now to have 2 draft picks in the first round, owning their own pick, and then they getting the 29th pick from the Miami Dolphins. So when it comes to what the Chiefs got in return for Tyreek Hill, they got a good haul in return. That, again, I'm not going to complain about what they got in return, but at the end of the day, what they lost on offense is going to be huge. So basically, the Chiefs have to hit on a wide receiver in this year's draft. So trading away Tyreek Kill is now adding to a position that Brett Veach and the Chiefs have to hit on in this year's draft. And then you have the defensive line, which is still bad. And I am sitting here wondering this entire offseason how this defensive line is still as bad as it was last year. The fact that there has been no improvements on this defensive line is kind of concerning for the Chiefs and heading into next season, because again, you look at the defensive line now, that's going to be a massive position that Brett Veach has no choice but to hit on in this year's draft, if you ask me. That defensive line was, in my opinion, the biggest liability on the entire team, and that is a position that Brett Veach has to hit on. If you're asking me, that has got to be a position that has to be a home run in this year's draft. It's a team that had 31 sacks, ranked 29th in the NFL, so it was not particularly good at finishing and getting home to the quarterback. And if you look at this offseason, they've missed out on some big-name guys like Von Miller, Emmanuel Ogbah, Zadarius Smith, Chandler Jones. Those are just a few of them. Now, some of those guys might be too expensive, but I'm just trying to point out the fact that it just felt like a lot of the offseason was just rolling, and that defensive line of the Chiefs didn't get any better. But when it comes to the cap space on the Chiefs team, that's when it can get a little bit frustrating, but we have to put that cap space that the Chiefs have now in a little bit of perspective. That cap space came from the Frank Clark restructure and the fact that Tyreek Hill got traded to the Miami Dolphins. And a lot of these signings happened before Tyreek Hill was traded to the Miami Dolphins. So there is a little bit of leeway that you can give Brett Veach and the Chiefs organization for the fact they didn't land some of these guys, is because a lot of those big names were already on other teams before the Chiefs had this cap space. That Davante Adams trade, and there's a lot of connections you can make with this offseason and how some teams struggled. You could argue that Davante Adams going to the Raiders, signing that contract, hit and hurt a lot of different teams, and the Chiefs are just one of them, because then they couldn't pay Tyreek Kill, which they offered him a fair salary, a really good contract. It's just he wanted to be the top paid guy. You look at Davante Adams' contract, then you look at the fact that some guys were already signed to other teams, those elite defensive players. It's really going to be hard for the Chiefs to improve the defensive line when, all the guys are already gone. They may have $18 million in cap space right now, but it's kind of hard to do anything with that whenever all the big name guys are already gone. And so while we could be sitting here complaining that Brett Veach has all that salary, that a huge cap number that they can spend right now, it's fairly solid cap number, it's hard to get upset with him because a lot of this was completely out of the Chiefs' control. So when it comes to the defensive line, that is also a position that the Chiefs have to hit. This is the one position I think the Chiefs have no choice but to hit on in this year's draft. But then they also have to get a good cornerback this year, because you look at the secondary. While I might be the only, I understand if people are a little bit worried about the secondary because it's not filled with elite level talent, but the guys that are there now, it's not something to overlook if you ask me, especially L'Jarius Sneed, who I think has potential to be a cornerback one in the NFL. That might just be me, but I think he's a very good player. Rashad Fenton had really good moments last year. And then the secondary the safety duo of Juan Thornhill and Justin Reed is not something I would gloss over. But obviously losing Charvarius Ward and Honey Badger, those are two positions that the Chiefs have to definitely fill. And it's going to become a point of emphasis on this year's draft. Do I think corner is as important as, a defensive line and a wide receiver this year? No, I don't think it is. But it's definitely a position that the Chiefs still have to draft this year. And it's definitely a position that has to get filled and become better heading into next season. It was a solid group last year. It wasn't the best, but Charvarius Ward obviously showing his worth, getting that, fairly good contract, fairly good deal in San Francisco, and then obviously losing Honey Badger. Those are two positions that the Chiefs have to fill. But at the same time, I'm not going to be too worried about the secondary right now, especially if they can get a defensive line that is at least competent and can finish plays, because there was times last year when it was just really frustrating how guys like Frank Clark were MIA. Chris Jones was getting no help. It felt like Chris Jones had a lot of work that he had to do. That was a huge burden to put on one guy. But then you have the final factor of why the Chiefs have to, and I mean, it's pretty obvious why the Chiefs have to hit huge in this year's draft. You look at the conference, and then you look mainly at the AFC West. You look at the division as a whole. The Chargers, they got better. They extended Mike Williams. They added Khalil Mack to their team. You look at the Broncos, they got freaking Russell Wilson as their quarterback now. You look at the Raiders, they aren't messing around. They added Chandler Jones. They traded for Davante Adams. So you have every single team in the AFC West that's trying to compete with the Chiefs, a team that has won that division 6 years in a row. So these teams are tired of losing. So they're adding big names. They're making huge moves. And it's now on the Chiefs' turn. The team that hasn't really gotten better since the offseason, since the season ended, they are the team that has to get better in this division right now. They're the one team that really hasn't made those splashy big moves yet. Now, those moves can come in the draft, but they have to come in the draft. The Chiefs have to make good moves in this year's draft to get better. Now, with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, I am never going to doubt this team. You look what he did in 2018, albeit Tyreek Kill was on that team. I get that, but you also have to look at what he did. He literally carried that team. The Chiefs had no defense that year, and he was able to carry them all the way to the AFC Championship game. But I think it's time that we stop putting all the pressure on Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs have to build a good and great team around him, and I think that starts with Brett Veach and the Chiefs. They have to hit huge in this year's draft for all the reasons I've laid out, for the fact that the division's gotten better, the fact that they've lost some key players like Tyreek Kill, Tyrann Mathieu, and the fact that their defensive line was just an absolute mess at times last year. So when it comes back to the question, how much pressure is on the Chiefs to have a good to great draft this year, I'd say there's a lot. There's a lot of things that the Chiefs have to do this year to improve that team and get better heading into next season. But those are just my thoughts on the Chiefs heading into this year's draft. How much pressure do you think is on Brett Veach and the Chiefs to have a good draft this year? And I'll see you in the next one.